I am Dr. Victor Blackthorne, and my story begins many years ago when I was a child. My father, a gifted surgeon, had an unhealthy fascination with death. He often conducted morbid experiments on animals, unbeknownst to the rest of the world. Growing up, I spent countless hours in his study, assisting him with these experiments. I was captivated by his work and the secrets he unraveled from the lifeless bodies. As I grew older, I followed in my father's footsteps, attending the most prestigious medical schools and learning from the brightest minds in the field. But my father's dark influence lingered in my soul, and a twisted curiosity for the forbidden corners of human anatomy began to consume me. I eventually opened my own practice, an elegant establishment in a quiet village. My patients respected me, and I was well regarded by the community. Little did they know that behind closed doors, I was succumbing to my morbid obsessions. It began with the terminally ill patients who sought me out for a final chance at life. I would assure them I could cure their afflictions, but my true intent was far more sinister. I experimented on their bodies, eager to discover the mysteries held within. When they succumbed to my torturous treatments, I was left with a feeling of immense satisfaction. As the years passed, I grew bolder. My victims were no longer confined to the terminally ill. Instead, I targeted those who were vulnerable, easily manipulated, and most importantly, isolated from the world. I would invite them to my clinic, luring them with false hope and promises of miracle cures. One day, a young woman named Susan visited my clinic. Susan was born to a loving family in a quaint, picturesque village. Her father was a local carpenter, known for his skilled craftsmanship and friendly demeanor, while her mother was a talented seamstress who created beautiful garments for the villagers. Susan was the youngest of 3 siblings, and she was doted upon by her entire family. Growing up, Susan was a lively and inquisitive child. She loved to explore the surrounding woods and fields, searching for interesting plants and insects to study. Her love for nature was evident, and she developed a deep understanding of the living world. As she grew older, her curiosity led her to pursue studies in botany, with dreams of one day becoming a renowned researcher. Despite her happy upbringing, Susan's life took a dark turn when she turned 19. She began to suffer from vivid and terrifying night terrors that left her shaken and exhausted. The dreams were so real and intense that she would often wake up screaming, drenched in sweat. Her once bright and inquisitive demeanor began to fade, replaced by a constant state of anxiety and fear. Her family, concerned for her well-being, sought help from local healers and doctors, but their treatments provided no relief. Susan's condition worsened, and her dreams began to blur the line between reality and nightmare. The once vibrant young woman became a shell of her former self, consumed by the horrors that plagued her mind. As word of Susan's condition spread throughout the village, she became isolated from her friends and neighbors. They whispered about her as she walked by, and some even crossed themselves, as if to ward off evil spirits. Her family remained steadfast in their support, but the strain of her ordeal took its toll on them as well. It was during this time of desperation that Susan and her family first heard about me, the renowned Dr. Victor Blackthorne. My reputation as a brilliant and compassionate physician provided a glimmer of hope for Susan, who had nearly lost all hope of ever living a normal life again. However, this fateful decision would ultimately lead her down a path of unimaginable darkness and suffering. When I first met Susan, I could see the weariness etched upon her face, the result of countless sleepless nights. Her once vibrant eyes now held an ever-present fear that spoke volumes about the horrors she had been experiencing. Her family, desperate to find relief for their beloved daughter, eagerly accepted my help. I welcomed Susan to my clinic, promising her and her family that I would do everything in my power to free her from the nightmares that haunted her. As I conducted my initial examinations, I found myself captivated by the complexities of Susan's psyche. I was determined to unlock the secrets that lay hidden within her tormented mind, even if it meant causing her further suffering. In the following weeks, I subjected Susan to a series of experiments, each one more invasive and cruel than the last. I probed her subconscious, manipulated her dreams, and administered potent drugs that further twisted her fragile mental state. To the outside world, I maintained the facade of the concerned and dedicated doctor, but behind closed doors, I reveled in the sadistic pleasure of my twisted experiments. Susan's condition deteriorated rapidly, and her family became increasingly desperate for answers. I assured them that I was making progress, and that a breakthrough was imminent. In reality, I had no intention of saving Susan. She was merely a pawn in my dark pursuit of knowledge. As Susan's body and mind crumbled under the weight of my experiments, I watched with cold detachment, documenting every detail of her descent into madness. Susan's time was drawing to a close, but my thirst for knowledge remained unquenched. Eventually, she was left as little more than a broken shell, her once promising future shattered by my insatiable curiosity. The nightmares she once suffered from were nothing compared to the horrors I inflicted upon her. In her final moments, she looked up at me with pleading eyes, begging me to end her suffering. I felt nothing but satisfaction. She was simply another casualty of my dark desires. With each victim, I became more proficient in my craft, and my thirst for knowledge grew. I documented every detail of my experiments, compiling them into a journal that would become my greatest and most horrifying masterpiece. But the darkness that consumed me began to take its toll. Sleep eluded me, and when it finally came, I was haunted by the tormented faces of those I had destroyed. I knew I could not continue down this path much longer, but the pull of my twisted curiosity was too strong to resist. I carried on with my experiments until one fateful day, when my carefully constructed facade began to crumble. A local detective had grown suspicious of the number of patients who seemed to pass away after visiting my clinic. It was only a matter of time before my secrets were unearthed. I knew I had to flee, to escape the consequences of my actions. I hastily gathered my journal and a few belongings, then set fire to my clinic. The flames roared, consuming the evidence of my atrocities, but they could not purge the darkness within my soul. As I watched the fire rage, I felt a strange sense of relief and bliss. This chapter had ended, but my story was far from over. I would disappear, perhaps to resurface in another village, under a new identity, and continue my quest for the forbidden knowledge that had long consumed me. The world may call me a monster. I prefer Dr. Blackthorne.